The walkway from Terminal C to American Airlines Flight 123, a Boeing 737 bound for Washington, D.C., was a cramped, claustrophobic metal corridor. Outside, Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport bustled with people in the bright morning light. But inside the boarding ramp, the air was thick with something unusual, and explosive. Agent Maya Jackson walked briskly with professional composure. The African-American woman in her mid-30s had a sharp face, intense eyes, and a trim figure. She wore black slacks, a cream silk blouse, and a charcoal blazer, a look that was both elegant and practical, perfect for an important business trip. She had just scanned her boarding pass, handing it to flight attendant David Miller, who greeted her at the door with a polite smile. But just as Maya's feet were on the threshold, a sharp voice rang out from behind, cutting through the polite atmosphere. "Stop right there." Maya turned around in surprise. Two airport police officers in dark blue uniforms of the Atlanta Police Department were walking quickly toward her. The one in front was tall, his face flushed, his badge on his chest reading Brewer, badge number 4821. He was followed by a younger officer, thin, with badge number Riley, badge number 5109, he seemed hesitant but still followed his partner. Before she could ask what was going on, Brewer reached out and grabbed Maya's arm roughly, causing her to lose her balance and almost fall. "Where are you going in such a hurry? Stop and check first." Maya tightened her grip on her bag, keeping her voice steady despite the anger that was simmering. "I'm a passenger, boarding the plane according to procedure." "What's wrong, officer?" She didn't raise her voice, but her eyes hardened. The calm reply only made Brewer more resentful. He glanced at Maya from head to toe, his gaze lingering longer than necessary on her business suit and briefcase. "Boarding a plane? You don't look like a normal passenger. What do you have in your bag?" he said sarcastically, then turned to Riley, "Check her papers." The narrow aisle suddenly became even more stuffy. David Miller was now standing frozen at the door of the plane, his smile gone, replaced by shock. The passengers behind Maya began to stop, eyes wide with curiosity, but no one dared to intervene. The sound of the plane's engine outside seemed to echo directly into the tense scene. Maya clenched her fist, but calmly took out her wallet, pulled out her Georgia driver's license and boarding pass, and held it out to Brewer. "Here's my papers, officer." Brewer snatched them, glanced at them as if for an excuse, and threw them back at her with a contemptuous gesture. "What about a driver's license? You think that proves anything?" he growled. "I told you, you look suspicious." Then he stepped closer, his voice low, but carrying an unmistakable whiff of racial spite. "You look like you're carrying dirty money. We see you like this all the time at this airport. Don't think wearing an expensive suit will fool us." Maya took a deep breath, suppressing the anger burning in her chest. She held his gaze, her voice stern. "Officer Brewer, what you just said is blatant discrimination and defamation. I demand that you give me a specific, legal reason for stopping and searching me. Otherwise, this is clearly harassment." The way she used his name, the way she stated the number and the rules, and the dignified manner made Brewer blush. Maya's confidence was like a slap to his seething ego. He gritted his teeth, his eyes darkening. "You dare accuse me of harassment? Very good." He turned sharply on Riley, hissing. "Put her in handcuffs. Charged with resisting an officer. Take her to the station, let her learn to respect the police." Riley jumped at Brewer's command. He looked at Maya, then back at his companion, his eyes filled with hesitation and confusion. But under the heavy pressure from Brewer, the older, tougher, and unyielding man, Riley was forced to pull the handcuffs from the holster at his waist, his hands shaking visibly. "You have no right to do that." Maya protested, her voice as sharp as a knife. "This is illegal detention." "Shut up." Brewer roared, then pushed so hard that Maya's back hit the cold metal railing. She staggered but managed to keep her balance. Riley, as if afraid of missing the chance to act on the command, immediately reached out and grabbed Maya's arms, locking the iron cuffs around her wrists. There was a dry click, the sound that marked the end of her freedom, right at the threshold of the plane she was about to board. Cold. The metal cuffs dug into her flesh, chilling her to the bone. But the humiliation and anger were even more intense. Handcuffed for no reason. Racist slurs. In public. In front of everyone. By the people whose job it was to protect the law. Brewer's triumphant expression added fuel to the fire. Maya gritted her teeth. Beside her, Riley paled, unable to meet her eyes. He knew he was wrong. But he was also too weak to do anything. Flight attendant David Miller and several nearby passengers were stunned. It had all happened so fast. So brutally. No one had time to say anything. An eerie silence filled the aisle where Maya had been forced back. As an FBI agent, Maya had been through dozens of life-and-death situations. She knew how to keep her head. And this was no different. Even in handcuffs. Even in the face of being forced off the flight. Even in the face of blatant abuse of power, her brain was still running like a machine. She remembered every detail, arriving at gate C-12. Checking in like any other passenger. Sarah Chen, a young Asian gate agent, checked tickets professionally. She was one of the last to board, after a few minutes of making a business call on a Bluetooth headset. No noise. No attention. Maybe it was that moment, she was standing alone, dressed smartly, looking confident and busy, that triggered Brewer's suspicions. He whispered something to Riley. Their furtive glances didn't escape her, but Maya took it as routine vigilance. But Brewer had a plan. He didn't act immediately. He waited until close to boarding, when she was about to enter the point of no return, to surprise her, to make her vulnerable, and make it difficult for outsiders to intervene. Sarah Chen must have seen it all. But when Brewer screamed, when Riley handcuffed Maya, the young woman stood there, terrified, silent. Now, Maya was being escorted off the plane, surrounded by a silent crowd. No struggling. No screaming. That would only hurt her more. Instead, she memorized. Every detail. Every facial expression. Every sound. She glanced up. 2 security cameras on the ceiling of the gate area. Another aimed at the stairs. The witnesses were silent. She collected the evidence in her mind instinctively. Occasionally, she asked, loud enough for those around her to hear. What am I under arrest for? What are your names and badge numbers? Do I have the right to an attorney? Not to beg. But to force them to reveal their transgressions. So that later, every word, every action today, would be a counterattack. Mia's tactics became more aggressive, his eyes burning with impatience at Maya's stubbornness. No longer hiding her intentions, Mia grabbed her arm and dragged her through the crowded airport waiting area. Curious eyes began to turn toward them. Phones were raised. Security cameras followed their movements. Murmurs rippled like waves breaking through the glass. But Mia ignored them all. Hurry, he growled, low and hoarse, but loud enough for a nearby microphone to pick up. Meet me at the terminal, Mia muttered. His voice was filled with anger and control. It was clear that the intention was to drag Maya away from the public space, where there were so many eyes and cameras, to a separate area, perhaps the security office or the airport police station. Maya sensed the danger immediately. If she was pulled away from the crowd, her chances of calling for help or turning the situation around would plummet. She couldn't let that happen. Not now. Not when she held evidence of a series of flagrant violations, racial profiling, abuse of power, false arrest, all perpetrated by these 2 officers. It was time to change the balance of power. It was time for them to know who they were messing with. Brewer and Riley pulled her faster, pushing through the crowd that was giving way without taking their eyes off the strange sight. Maya stopped abruptly, her shoes screeching against the floor. "I need to make a phone call," she said. Her voice was low, but firm, ringing clearly through the airport, more like a directive than a demand. A group of passengers stopped. One pulled out a phone to record. Two children pointed. The sight had attracted attention. Brewer turned, his face contorted with frustration. "I told you not to call, are you deaf?" he snapped, and then he raised his fist, the threat hanging in the air. "You want me to use force?" But Maya didn't flinch. She looked Brewer straight in the eye, her gaze razor sharp. "I have the right to make phone calls after I've been arrested. And I need to call my superiors right now. This is urgent." Brewer sneered. "What superiors? Don't you think I'll let you off by inventing a boss?" Before he could finish, Riley, standing behind him, tried to push Maya forward. And that was when she acted. With a decisive move practiced at Quantico, Maya spun around, using Riley's force to break free from his hold. Not an attack, just a gap. Her movements were clean, precise, enough to stop both officers in their tracks. She raised her head, her voice dropping from above. "I am Special Agent Maya Jackson, badge number 7358, of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You have committed an unlawful arrest of a federal agent on duty." The announcement was like a bombshell in the waiting area. A strange silence fell. The airport loudspeakers fell silent, and everyone's eyes turned to the three people in the center. The phones were raised higher now. The camera lens focused on Brewer and Riley, the two officers frozen in place. Brewer, who had been so domineering and threatening, now stood frozen. His face paled, his lips moving as if he were wondering if he was awake. What did you say?" he stammered. "No, it can't be. You're lying." Maya didn't answer. Though handcuffed, she bent slightly, revealing from inside her vest a shiny metal badge, her name, her picture, the FBI logo, all designed to raise no suspicion. The overhead light reflected off the badge, illuminating the horror on Brewer's face. Riley staggered as if about to collapse, her eyes glued to the badge as if she saw the sentence hanging over her head. A black woman. A federal agent. A living witness to the truth. "Oh my God, Mark," Riley whispered, her voice catching in her throat. We're screwed. What the hell did we just do?" That moment, no more doubt, no more debate, was a thunderclap that shattered all illusions. All that remained was the stark truth: they had made an irreparable mistake. A grave, irrevocable sin. Terror swallowed them both. The once proud officers now stammered, apologizing like two men who had just woken from a nightmare. "Sir. Agent, we're sorry. We didn't know, we really didn't know." Brewer trembled, fumbling in his pockets for the keys, trying to uncuff Maya's wrists, his hands shaking like he had a fever. "We were young. It was a misunderstanding." "We didn't mean to," Riley interjected, almost crying, his voice choked. Please don't. We're sorry, 1,000 times sorry. Whatever, just stand still." Maya Jackson's voice was cold, sharp as a knife. The command cut through the chaos like a sword. Immediately, all movement stopped. Even though Brewer was still shaking with the key, the command made him freeze like a child who had just been caught stealing candy. "Status quo," Maya said, her voice equally sharp, rubbing her red wrists from the handcuffs. "No one leaves this place until your superiors and my team arrive." She glanced around. Gatekeeper Sarah Chen and flight attendant David Miller were still standing there, their faces as pale as ghosts, while the surrounding passengers were stunned into silence. Maya turned to Sarah, her voice less tense but still serious. "Gatekeeper. Use radio or intercom. Call airport surveillance immediately. Report emergency at Gate C12. Officers Brewer and Riley involved. Need someone on scene immediately." Sarah was startled, nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am, and hurriedly turned away. Maya pulled out her phone, her hand as steady as steel. She dialed the familiar number and spoke as soon as the other end picked up. Jackson at ATL. Situation C12. 2 APD officers, Brewer 4821, Riley 5109, unlawful detainer. Clear. Request immediate attendance. Also notify APDA. On the other end of the line, ASAC Robert Evans, her superior at the FBI Atlanta office, froze for a few seconds. Then he replied neatly, seriously. Roger, Jackson. We're on our way. Minutes later, Sergeant Thompson, Brewer and Riley's direct supervisor, rushed onto the scene. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and a thick mustache, his face scowling from a mid-shift emergency call. What the hell is going on here? Thompson roared as he saw the 2 junior officers cowering next to a black woman, the crowd buzzing with the sound of bees. Brewer and Riley tried to say something, their voices shaking, stuttering in defense. They were just doing their job. The woman looked suspicious, they didn't mean to. But Maya stepped forward, cutting him off like a cold knife. She looked Sergeant Thompson straight in the eye. I'm Special Agent Maya Jackson, FBI. She pulled out her badge and held it in front of him. 2 of your officers stopped me without cause, used racial slurs, and illegally detained me on the boarding bridge while I was on duty. Sergeant Thompson froze. The word FBI crushed all excuses in his mind. His eyes scanned the federal identification, then back to his subordinates, the 2 of them now shaking like students about to be expelled. His face went from red to white. He knew he was facing a real storm. A major scandal threatens to bury the careers of many, almost simultaneously. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the airport's C-12 gate area, as ASAC Robert Evans led a group of 3 other FBI agents into the scene. Their black suits, powerful gait, and cold demeanor made the atmosphere heavy. Their appearance made the crowd hold their breath. No one dared to speak. Evans walked straight to Maya Jackson, a worried look flashing in her eyes before returning to her usual calm. Jackson, are you okay? Maya nodded, her voice steady. I'm fine, Evans. She immediately pointed to the 2 police officers standing dumbfounded beside her. These are the 2 officers responsible for the incident, Brewer and Riley. Evans didn't need any further explanation. He turned to face Sergeant Thompson, who was still stunned by the rapid development. Evans's voice was like a knife cutting through the silence. I order these 2 officers to be placed on administrative leave. Immediately. They will be placed on administrative duty, stripped of their badges, weapons, and all communications equipment. The FBI will take over the investigation. Sergeant Thompson clenched his fists, his jaw twitching slightly in anger and confusion. But under Evans's icy gaze and the overwhelming presence of the FBI, he knew he had no choice. Thoroughly gritting his teeth, Thompson said each word. Do you hear me? Surrender your weapons and badges, now. Every eye in the area, passengers, airport staff, and agents, was on Brewer and Riley as they quietly removed their guns, radios, and badges. The 2 officers, no longer haughty and arrogant, bowed their heads, trembling, silently taking the blow. It was a humiliating moment, a silent, humiliating collapse, a silent, humiliating end to their police careers. Maya Jackson was now in full control of the situation. Quickly coordinating with ASAC Evans and Sergeant Thompson, she ordered the scene cordoned off. No one touches anything. All evidence must be preserved. She directed the initial collection of information from key witnesses, Sarah Chen, David Miller, and ordered the sealing of all data from security cameras around the area. Brewer and Riley, now no longer officers, were escorted from the area by 2 other officers. They walked away, watched with contempt, anger, and curiosity by the crowd. No one remembered the power they once held, only shame, fear, and an uncertain future. The events at Gate C-12 ended with the absolute triumph of reason and justice. But that was only the beginning. News of an FBI agent being illegally detained and publicly humiliated by airport police spread quickly, sending shockwaves through the Atlanta Police Department. That afternoon, Chief Miller convened an emergency internal investigation. He gave full authority to Captain Davis, a notoriously tough and uncompromising officer. The focus was on getting to the bottom of the incident, not only because of pressure from the FBI but also to prevent any unforeseen consequences for the reputation of the entire force. Detective Miller, a veteran internal affairs investigator, was assigned to lead the investigation, working closely with ASAC Evans and the FBI agents. Agent Maya Jackson's testimony, recorded in detail and incisive, shed light on the entire incident, from the moment she was stopped to the moment she was rescued. In her statement, she did not shy away from the harsh racial slurs that Officer Brewer had used. ASAC Evans also provided a clear report, confirming Agent Jackson's mental and physical state, as well as what happened after he and his team arrived at the scene. An extensive investigation has begun. Evidence will be uncovered. The consequences will be unforgiving. And whoever is involved, whether senior officer or rookie, will have to face the truth. For justice, this time, there will be no compromise. Internal Investigation Report on Gate D5 Incident, Conduct of Officers Brewer and Riley. On-scene supervisor Terrence Hall said he received an urgent call from the airport dispatcher about a potentially violent altercation between two security officers and a passenger at Gate D5. Upon arriving on the scene, Hall described the chaotic scene. A black woman in a TSA uniform was handcuffed on the steps, as several passengers stood looking on in shock. What he saw firsthand, the tension, fear, and anger on the faces of the onlookers, prompted him to immediately activate the critical incident reporting procedure. In her testimony, the civilian witness, Gate Agent Sarah Chen, was initially reluctant, but later confirmed with certainty that Officers Brewer and Riley had intentionally stopped and questioned Special Agent Maya Jackson for no apparent reason. Chen added that Brewer was disengaged and hostile. David Miller, a flight attendant who happened to be present at the time of the incident, described the situation as horrifying and unacceptable. He said he was pushed back when he tried to help, and was still in shock at seeing a federal agent handcuffed in an airport that is supposed to be a symbol of safety. Several other passengers who were in the gate area were also contacted. They provided appropriate statements, confirming that the behavior and words of Officers Brewer and Riley were both offensive and discriminatory. Data from security cameras in the D5 gate area and the aircraft runway was collected and analyzed by the IIA. Although there was no audio, the video captured the officers' actions in full. In particular, the moment when Riley, with a bewildered expression, handcuffed Agent Jackson at Brewer's direction. The footage also shows Brewer's aggression, contrasting with Riley's hesitation and fear, and the anger in the eyes of onlookers. During the IIA's separate investigation, both officers were called in for interviews. Their responses were stark. Mark Brewer initially denied any wrongdoing, attempting to blame Agent Jackson, claiming she provoked the attack. He was uncooperative, hostile, and flatly denied using racist language, saying it was a misunderstanding in the heat of the moment. Brewer even blamed Riley, accusing his partner of overreacting. However, Brewer's evasiveness, weak reasoning, and lack of evidence did not escape seasoned investigators. In contrast, Officer Riley initially remained silent, but then, perhaps feeling abandoned by his teammates and fearing legal repercussions, decided to tell the whole truth during a second interview. Riley admitted that he had no legitimate reason to stop Agent Jackson. He claimed that Brewer had acted on personal bias, using racial slurs and extreme insults. It was Brewer who ordered her handcuffed when questioned about the legal basis. Riley expressed deep remorse and admitted that he was too afraid to object. Riley's testimony became a key piece in the puzzle, and also confirmed his own passive complicity in the incident. Both officers' personal records were also reviewed. While Riley had no history of serious misconduct, Brewer had been the subject of numerous complaints from passengers about his arrogant attitude and inappropriate behavior. However, previous complaints have been ignored or not acted upon due to lack of evidence, raising concerns that the recent behavior was not a one-off incident but rather a manifestation of a systematic pattern of behavior. Throughout the investigation, the FBI followed the case closely and maintained close contact with the IIA, although there was not enough evidence to file a criminal charge under federal law. Zach Evans, representing the FBI, emphasized that the agency was closely monitoring the case and expected a fair and transparent outcome from the Atlanta Police Department. Although initially kept under wraps, information about the incident eventually leaked to local media, possibly from witnesses or airport employees. Public opinion immediately erupted. Atlanta-based civil rights organizations spoke out strongly, demanding that the APD provide transparency in the case and severely punish the officers who engaged in racist behavior, while increasing pressure on Chief Miller and the entire APD leadership. After 2 weeks of intense investigation, Internal Affairs has completed a detailed investigative report, dozens of pages long, with accompanying depositions, video analysis, and records. The conclusion is clear and indisputable. Officer Mark Brewer and Officer Chris Riley committed serious violations of professional and ethical principles, causing unacceptable damage to the public trust. Mark Brewer and Chris Riley have been officially terminated. Not only did they commit serious violations of the Atlanta Police Department's, APD, policies and standards, but they also caused serious damage to the reputation of the entire force. The misconduct included abuse of power, unlawful stops and arrests, use of profane and racist language, and a clear lack of professionalism. Given the severity of the incident, the Internal Affairs Division did not hesitate to take the highest level of disciplinary action, recommending immediate termination of both officers. A detailed investigation report and recommendations were submitted to Chief Miller. Mr. Miller spent the afternoon carefully reading every page of the document, reviewing video evidence, and considering all the possible political and social implications. This was not an easy decision. Firing 2 officers at once would certainly cause shockwaves within the force. However, the evidence gathered by Internal Affairs, particularly testimony from FBI agent Maya Jackson, along with key witnesses and confessions from Riley, painted an undeniable picture. Brewer had blatantly abused his power, and Riley had been a silent accomplice. The pressure from the FBI, though not yet public, was something APD could not ignore. If the case were to be escalated to the federal level, APD would not only face complex legal problems but also risk becoming the center of a national media scandal. Given these factors, Chief Miller was forced to accept Internal Affairs' recommendation. He signed off on Brewer and Riley, effective immediately. Official notices were sent to the 2 former officers, citing serious violations of their ethics, use of force policies, and anti-discrimination regulations. The police careers of Mark Brewer and Chris Riley officially ended in disgrace and shame. With this stain on their records, their chances of finding employment in security or law enforcement were virtually nil. They paid a heavy price for their arrogance and blind prejudice. Shortly thereafter, APD issued a short press release, confirming the termination of the 2 officers involved in the serious incident at the airport and reaffirming its commitment to maintaining the highest ethical and professional standards, with zero tolerance for any form of abuse of power or discrimination. In addition, the department also conducted mandatory re-evaluations and expanded retraining for the entire airport police force, focusing on communication skills, identifying bias, and handling situations fairly and professionally. As for Special Agent Maya Jackson, who was targeted in the incident, she received a formal and heartfelt apology from Chief Miller in a personal call. While accepting the apology professionally, Maya emphasized that what was more important was taking concrete action to prevent similar incidents in the future. After completing her detailed report to the FBI, Maya quickly boarded a flight to Washington, D.C., continuing her responsible work with her usual steadfastness and courage. The incident at the Atlanta airport was a bitter experience, a stark reminder of the injustices and prejudices that she, like many other African Americans, still face, even from those in uniform who enforce justice. Despite the supposed Protection of the Force Act, the 2 abusers were finally held accountable for their wrongdoing. Her removal from the police force, even if it was only an internal disciplinary measure, still gave her a sense of justice. She knew that firing two individuals would not eradicate systemic racism or the long-standing abuses in law enforcement. But at least in this case, the truth had been revealed. Two bad guys had been punished. As a strong and resilient FBI agent, she had not only stood up for herself, but had also helped clean up the corrupt elements in the ranks of law enforcement. The satisfaction, though not complete, came from knowing that the system, however slow, could still work. That the wrongdoer had paid the price. And most of all, that the victim's dignity had been restored. It's a small, but necessary, victory on the long and arduous journey to true justice. Thank you for listening to this story. If you found it meaningful, please like and subscribe. Tomorrow, we'll be back with another story, just as inspiring and valuable.